Well, Dan Perry, the former Middle East editor of the Associated Press, said that the foreign media in Gaza was heroic in its success in getting the story out. He told me that the strike on the building did not, in the end, damage the coverage of the conflict, and until Israel shows proof that the building was indeed serving Hamas intelligence, then the IDF spokesman's credibility was being harmed.
Look, Israel claims that there was a very serious Hamas activity happening in this building that justified such an extreme action. I couldn't tell you if it's true or false. I know from talking to my AP colleagues that they had no information about any such thing. And I believe the same applies to Al Jazeera. And they have demanded that proof be produced, proof that is convincing and unequivocal. And now they're also asking for an independent investigation. I can't judge whether it was a mistake or not. I can tell you that from, I currently deal in public relations and communications advisory, and I can tell you that to attack and destroy a building with major international media in it is something that probably should only be done when you're very, very sure, when you've taken every conceivable step to minimize the damage to the civilians and to the media, and in absolute readiness to produce quickly and publicly and convincingly clear evidence as to why you did that. Now, Israel did not do that. And I have to say, if I was advising Israel on what to do to make itself look, reasonable in its comportment in this conflict, then that was a mistake.
Look, let's talk about the difficulties of covering a war zone, particularly in, like you called it, a police state like Gaza Strip or other places in the world. When you have to report stories, is there a sense that you're being censored if you don't put out the right story in a place like Gaza Strip?
I think, Israeli spokesmen, looking for advantage wherever it can be found, make a lot of hay out of this argument. And it's undeniable that whenever you report from a police state, that is a factor in what you can report, sometimes officially and sometimes unofficially. And every international medium, news platform, that reports from countries that are not democratic, and that is currently most of the world's countries, to a certain extent, faces this issue of whether there is intimidation, implied or direct, and whether there is, official, whether there are official channels that prevent you from putting stuff out. And by the way, not to compare Israel to Hamas at all, but Israel is one of the few democracies, possibly the only democracy, that has a permanent military censor.
Well, let's get back to Gaza for a minute. I mean, how heroic is it to be a journalist covering Hamas and the Gaza Strip? I mean, I had a look just now at the AP photos that have been coming out for the past week. I hadn't seen not even one photo of anybody from Hamas. It's just mainly children and destroyed houses and the stuff that you can imagine that the Hamas would allow out. But where are the stuff like people firing rockets or any sort of things like that?
Well, I honestly can't speak to what's been put out this week. I have no idea about what you are suggesting now. I can tell you that in the past, when I was Middle East editor of AP, we put out plenty of videos of rockets being launched from within civilian areas, and that certainly sustains the Israeli narrative, which is correct, that Hamas is firing from civilian areas and sometimes essentially hiding behind human shields. When I said on your colleague's program here that I believe the foreign media in Gaza, by and large, is heroic in its success in getting the story out, that contained more than a slight concession to the fact that there is an element of difficulty in getting the story out of a place that is a police state. I think Israel makes too much of that. I think at the end of the day, the story gets out. I think it's very, very important to protect journalists' safety and their ability to operate in peace and their access to information and to events, not because journalists are more important as individuals, but because this mission that they have and the role that they play is critical to civilization.
Let me ask you a very delicate question. I mean, every country that AP exists in has foreign reporters that come in. They also have local reporters that they hire. And Gaza has been pretty much cut off for foreign reporters to get in there. Now I think Israel's not allowing any foreign reporters.
I think at this point it's Israel that's preventing the foreign
Israel is preventing the foreign reporters. So the world has to rely on reporters who are there already. In many cases, especially in the AP, there are the local reporters. Now, are they conscripted in any way? They have to put out the picture they think that that Hamas wants to see?
I mean, look, I realize it may be hard to believe, but I've never seen evidence of it. And I have seen evidence of a lot of courageous journalism being done that did not in any way please the Hamas. We never sat on facts like, as we said before, that rockets are being fired out of civilian areas, that Hamas is essentially intimidating its own citizenry, that Gaza is not a free place. We've reported on these things. It seems a little bit beside the point to me, therefore, when you see that the story is getting out in a way that is rather complete, that Israel tries so hard to make propaganda value out of the point that you're raising here today. It's a fair point. But in fact, weirdly, perhaps Hamas has other fish to fry, and I haven't observed systematic intimidation of the press. I won't deny that when you're reporting on the mafia in New Jersey, you might think twice before, publishing your scoop on Tony Soprano. I mean, that is just human nature, and it is the price of doing business in countries that are not democratic.
On social media, AP has taken a blow from some of the pro-Israeli people saying, look, AP, they had the scoop right under their eyes. They didn't even report it.
Which was the scoop?
That they had Hamas right next to them.
I mean, look, from what they tell me, they did not know any such thing. But let's be realistic. I mean, Hamas is all over the Gaza Strip. They have a monopoly, or near monopoly, you have to count Islamic Jihad, over the force of arms. And it's not like AP or Al Jazeera are the sheriffs of that building. They can't control anything. I have little doubt that if they had seen genuine military activity happening regularly and systematically in the building, as opposed to Hamas people coming in to be interviewed, by the way, then they would have made their displeasure clear and manifest, because they would know that turns the building into a military target, and no one wants their office to be a military target.
Now, finally, what's all this mean for the continuation of AP coverage in the Gaza Strip?
I mean, this is a dramatic event, and AP has, made no secret of its displeasure and shock. But I don't think it changes the journalism. I think they've relocated to other offices rather quickly, and the news is still getting out, and there's no shortage of rooftops.
But what about the credibility?
I see no reason to believe the credibility of AP has been harmed at all. I mean, it's not like they were knowingly broadcasting from Hamas office. They claim, and I think credibly claim, to have had no knowledge of any such activity. And by the way, to restate the rather important and obvious point, Israel has not produced any proof. And I think Israel's rather blasé and generalistic claims about what was going on in that building suggest a little bit of arrogance about the credibility of the Israeli military spokesman, as if you can just matter-of-factly make some general claim and people are going to believe it and move on.
Dan Perry, the former Middle East editor of the Associated Press.